folks, HR Funk here with a classic firearm review of the Marlin Model 1894 CP. Now you may be asking yourself why I'm calling this a classic firearms review for a firearm that's still in production. Well, there's two reasons for that. One is since this rifle has been more or less in continuous production for nearly 125 years, I think that alone helps it to qualify as a classic in terms of a classic firearms review. I also think that since Remington/Marlin does not currently have a .357 Magnum chambered 1894 in their lineup, that also makes this a classic firearm. So for those reasons, we're going to take a closer look at the Model 1894 CP in this classic firearms review. The Model 1894 CP follows the lines of all the other Marlin Model 1894s. It has a solid top receiver. It is side ejecting, so it's easy, and you can see that it's drilled and tapped on that top of the receiver for scope mounts. Now, I did not put a scope on this. I went with a Williams aperture sight, which I like very much. I've said this in other lever gun reviews that I don't really prefer an optic of any kind on a lever gun. It seems anachronistic to begin with, and I think it also just kind of goes against the lines and the natural balance and handling of a lever action rifle. So for those reasons, I tend to shy away from scopes and red dots and things like that on the lever actions. Now, if you happen to like those, that's fine with me. I just don't prefer them myself. The 1894 CP also has a 16-inch barrel. This is a very easy packing rifle or carbine. Now, it does have the ported barrel that became fashionable with Marlin, beginning with the guide gun back around 2000. And it seemed like for a while there, everything they produced in a carbine length barrel had the porting on. The porting doesn't really do much with the .357 Magnum cartridge, which is what this rifle is chambered for. Out of a shoulder arm, the .357 Magnum has very manageable recoil to begin with. So that's really almost more cosmetic. It was almost more of a marketing thing than it was an actual functional enhancement to the rifle. But it's there and it doesn't bother me. It does, the one thing I will say, the one negative I'll say about it, is it increases the noise in the muzzle blast when you're shooting this. You really don't want to shoot this with full power .357 Magnum ammunition without having some sort of hearing protection on. The 1894 CP features a tubular magazine that holds 8 rounds of .357 Magnum ammunition. It will also chamber and function just fine with .38 Special ammunition, which makes this a very versatile carbine. It is very compact, as you can see, and I have also found this to be a very accurate carbine. We're going to do some shooting with it here in a little bit. We'll take a look at just how accurate it is and how well it functions. We'll do some shooting with both .357 Magnum and .38 Special ammunition just to compare it. A little bit about the carbine chambered for .357 Magnum to begin with, though. In this carbine length barrel, the ammunition that I'm using today increases its velocity, or I should say the bullet velocity increases over 400 feet per second from that same ammunition and that same bullet in a 6-inch barrel revolver. I've got a load that out of a 6-inch barreled revolver fires a 158 grain bullet at 1250 feet per second. Again, that's a 6-inch revolver ballistics. Out of this carbine, that same ammunition with the same bullet is going over 1660 feet per second. So it's over a 400 foot per second gain that you get from this carbine length barrel. Now, I have seen, I've not done it myself, but I have seen people harvest very respectable sized deer with the .357 Magnum cartridge out of a revolver. So think about that and then consider that in terms of the additional terminal effectiveness you get from the longer barrel and the higher velocity, and that makes this little carbine a very respectable close range hunting firearm for anything up to the size of deer. Now also, in a pinch, you could do a lot worse than one of these for a self-defense firearm. Truth be told, there's probably a lot of law enforcement officers that could work just fine with something like this. It does have 8 shots as opposed to the modern tactical carbines that generally have a 30-round magazine. But on the other hand, for years and years and years, American law enforcement officers worked just fine with a 5 or 6 shot shotgun as their long arm. Again, when you think about the effectiveness of the .357 Magnum cartridge, which no one has ever questioned in terms of its effectiveness as a law enforcement round, And really, the only reason the .357 Magnum faded away is because semi-auto pistols became more fashionable with a greater magazine capacity as opposed to the 6-round capacity of most of the revolvers that were in use back in the day. But as far as effectiveness, the .357 Magnum is just as effective today as it was in 1935 when it first saw the light of day. So with all that said, let's go ahead and do some shooting with this. We'll take a look at the accuracy, and we'll even try a few reactive targets before it's all said and done and see how it does on them. Okay folks, we're getting ready to load up here and start to do some shooting. A couple of things I wanted to mention before I do that are the factory sights that this carbine came with. It does have Marlin standard semi-buckhorn rear sight. I've replaced the front sight and, as I mentioned, the rear sight with an aperture sight. The aperture sight works very, very well with this little carbine. With the disc installed, it gives a very nice fine sight picture for accurate shooting, and you can also remove this disc, and what you're left with is a fairly large ghost ring style sight for very quick shooting on fleeting targets or moving targets. So it makes it a very versatile sight, and as you can see, it's micrometer adjustable, which is one of the things I really liked with being able to add it to the 1894 CP. The 1894 CP also has Marlin's crossbolt safety, which I'll push through so you can see it right there. Now some people are very critical of this, and you can see it on the other side when it comes back through. And it has the red line around it there, so you know that's the fire position. I really don't mind the safety. In fact, I kind of like it for loading purposes, because I can put the safety on, and now I can load up my magazine. There's 8 rounds in the magazine. And the nice thing now is I can charge my chamber with the safety on, lower the hammer, and put it in the half cock position, again with the safety on. Now I can take the safety off, and all I have to do to fire that first shot is cock the hammer and squeeze the trigger. Or I could leave the chamber empty, and all I would have to do is cycle the action, and then the carbine would be ready to fire. So again, I'm not a real big critic of that crossbolt safety. In fact, I think it's at least a little bit useful. Okay folks, we're all loaded up, lined up, and ready to go. I'm going to be shooting standing offhand at about 40 yards, which is exactly what this little carbine was intended for. I'm going to be shooting at a defensive silhouette type target. So I'm just going to put 3, 4, 5 rounds on target and see what the accuracy looks like from back here. So here we go. Okay, let's go take a look at the target. And I would say at that distance, shooting at that tempo, this fellow would be having a pretty bad day. Okay folks, how about if we repeat that exercise with 38 specials? We'll see if there's any difference in the functioning or any difference in our point of impact, or at least any measurable difference in our point of impact from 40 yards. Let's try it out. I can tell you, recoil-wise, that's about like shooting a .22. There's virtually no recoil with the 38s, even though this is a 158 grain bullet, probably traveling over 1,000 feet per second out of this 16-inch carbine barrel. And the 38s hit just a little bit higher from 40 yards, or at least I hit a little higher with them. I saw one shot that I thought was a little high. I did not see 2 of them, but it looks like all of the 38s are just a little bit higher from that distance than the .357s. Definitely not too high that it's going to cause any kind of a problem for defensive applications. Okay folks, you had to know this one was coming. Is the 1894 CP a tack driver? I've got one of my thumbtacks in the target down there. We're going to take a couple of shots and see if we can knock that thing out of there. We'll try to whack a tack. I am going to use my glasses this time just to sharpen up that front sight a little bit. By the way, if I didn't say already, I was taking this shot from 50 feet. So let's see, is the 1894 CP a 50-foot tack driver? And yes, it would appear the 1894 CP is a tack driver. At 50 feet, I was so far away I couldn't tell if the tack was still there or not. I had to walk down range and look. It's gone. I replayed the video in my other camera, and a bullet hit it and knocked it out of there. So the 1894 CP is a tack driver, I'm happy to say. Okay folks, the last thing we have on tap for today is a couple of water bottle desperados. I'm going to try to end their evil ways with the 1894 CP from a distance of about 25 yards. By the way, this is full power 158 grain 357 Magnum ammunition. Let's see how the water bottles react to this. One down. Two up, two down with the 1894 CP. Okay folks, and that's the video for today. If you find an 1894 CP in a used rack someplace and you're interested, definitely take a look. They are fine little carbines. They are light, they are quick handling, easy to carry, and as you can see, they still pack a pretty good wallop with the 357 Magnum cartridge. And with the 38 Special cartridge, they make an effective little firearm with almost no recoil. Just fantastic little firearms. And if you find the 1894C, which is the non-ported version of this same little carbine, they are just as good, and you don't have to worry quite as much about the muzzle blast and the noise. In any regard, that's the video for today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or comments, be sure to leave those below. And as always, until next time, good shooting. Bye-bye.